My son will be happy to hear this is going to be our final attempt to explain to the world the reason for the Great Pyramid. We're going to include every item on this list and show how they all link together. The only thing we are going to do is correct one misconception miles away from the Great Pyramid. By doing that, every item on this list links together. It would be impossible for those to link together and not be the basis for the Great Pyramid. We're going to start with the need for water. You're probably saying, why did they need water? The Nile was right in front of the pyramid. That's what people don't understand. There was an upper Nile and a lower Nile. The confusing part is, 5,000 years ago, the Egyptians called a flowing body of water the Nile. There's a river in the United States of America, in Yuma, Arizona, called the Colorado River. It flows year-round, day and night. In that same city, there's a river called the Gila River. It only flows when it rains in the mountains surrounding it. The difference is we know they aren't the same because of the name change. The Colorado River and the Gila River. But in Egypt, they called the Upper Nile and the Lower Nile. So I'm going to refer to the river that was flowing in front of Giza, the lower. To sum up the purpose for the Great Pyramid as quickly as possible, the pharaohs built an aquifer from the upper into the lower so that it could drain out and they could have water, but they wanted to be able to control it at both ends. When they decided which way to settle on, they blocked off the portions that would close it the other way. Next, I'm going to address the moat, the causeway, and the aquifer. They built an aquifer from the upper, ran it underground in the lower during the dry season, ran it to the foot of the Great Pyramid, then ran it underneath the subchamber. The water would have flowed up and entered the moat. The moat was built before the Great Pyramid. From there, the water would have filled the moat, flowed down the causeway, and entered the Nile. This would have been what they would have used to pull the blocks from the Nile, staying on the barges, up the causeway into the moat to build the Great Pyramid. Next, we're going to address the descending passageway and the swivel door. The sizes of these rooms are irrelevant. It's their purpose that's important. The descending passageway was the pathway that the water used to flow from the subchamber up to what would become the swivel door. The swivel door, for 3,000 years, nobody could find a way into the Great Pyramid. Finally, a tomb raider took a crew and hacked a hole into the side of the Great Pyramid and stumbled onto the descending passageway. He walked to the end of it, and by himself, he pushed on the wall. With ease, this several-ton block opened. But it was impossible to open it from the outside, which proves the swivel door was only meant to open out, not in. The intention of this pyramid is for something to come out of it, not to go in it. We're going to now address the well shaft passageway. During the beginning of the rainy season, they would have blocked off the inlet at the upper so water couldn't flow in. What would have happened is all the water that was above the swivel door would have drained out of the Great Pyramid. So we drew it in yellow to represent air. Because the inlet was higher than the outlet, when you turn it off, the water has to balance out. That would have probably filled miles of aquifer with air. When they opened it up again at the beginning of the dry season to flow, this air would have started mixing with the water, compressing the air as it was rushing towards the swivel door. If they would have let that water flow, that swivel door would have started opening and shutting, slamming shut, and probably break it. It doesn't matter whether the well shaft passageway was incorporated in at the beginning or in the middle of the Great Pyramid. That passageway was designed to relieve the air. The air could escape out the top while the water would then flow towards the swivel door. The yellow and blue that I've drawn in the aquifer is to represent the air and the water as it's heading towards the well shaft passageway and the swivel door to exit. You can see how the air would have separated and gone straight up the top, drawn in yellow, where the blue would have continued up and gone out the swivel door. If our theory is correct, and they would have tried the other method, there would have to be an elevation that the water would have balanced out at. I did a little further research on the Great Pyramid and found out the Grand Gallery is described as being watertight on the lower half, and that includes the floor, the walls, and the ceiling. But approximately at the halfway point, they dropped the quality. It didn't seem to be of concern. We believe this would have been the exact elevation of the inlet in the upper. So we've drawn a line from representing the elevation of the inlet at the upper to the elevation of where the Grand Gallery changes in its quality of workmanship. Once they decided on which method to use and which method to not use, they blocked off the parts that would have affected it the other way. They decided not to use the method of balancing the water out. So to block that off, they put a granite block in the ascending passageway to restrict water from flowing up the Grand Gallery. But they allowed the air to continue up and rise through the Grand Gallery and exit out of the 1 8-inch shaft that remains in the Great Pyramid. The Queen's Chamber and the granite slabs above the King's Chamber. We address them in other videos. To save time, you can watch those and you'll understand it. This leaves Herodotus and the slab in the grotto. I want to save the slab in the grotto for last because it brings the whole thing together. Without it, this theory would not be valid. Regarding Herodotus, there's a video I recommend you watch called Sokovich Explaining the Shafts in Khufu's Pyramid. It has an amazing amount of information regarding Herodotus that is very factual. I don't necessarily agree with his theory, but the facts regarding Herodotus totally corroborate this theory. There's one other interesting thing in that theory at approximately 11 minutes in. There's an inscription on one of the blockades in the Queen's Chamber that corroborates our theory and makes us believe the elevation of the block is approximately just below the waterproof line in the Grand Gallery.
If you understand or are interested in reading more about our theory, you can go to this link here to find out more about it in a more concise manner.
People believe there were 3 items left placed in the Great Pyramid. I believe it was a hook, a bar, and a barge. There was actually a 4th item that would have been in the King's Chamber. The first person that would have entered the King's Chamber would have seen this item and taken it. I'm not going to reveal what that item is at this time, but at a later date I will. If you understand what you just saw and realize that we solved the mystery of the Great Pyramid, the Nugena brothers ought to call us and we can tell them the mystery of Oak Island. Or at the very least, maybe we could get on Conan's show.